I know you wrote an article for BrownsFilmBreakdown.com, modernizing Kevin Stefanski's offense, what it looks like based on which teams are kind of running it best. So you came up
Hmm.
with kind of four things. First was fix the under the center run game with zone baseline and gap inclusion. So take us through that and take us through the other three as well.
Yeah, no, it's they're not far off. This is not a world they haven't lived in, so it's not some of this isn't rocket science, but like I thought the thing that they needed to do more than anything last year was modernizing what they do offensively. I didn't think they needed to rewrite who they were. I didn't think they needed to tailor their structure, their scheme to one person. I just thought they needed to modernize. They didn't do that. They went in a different direction. They went toward chasing everything they thought was conducive for Deshaun Watson. But I think that like a part of what I my theory here is that in the process of chasing improvements from the quarterback, they lost the soul and identity of who they are offensively, what they lean into, what their base is, what their guys can run with their eyes closed, right? They're just so used to it. So uh, I would say the first is, yeah, they need to get back to running under center stuff and like having an under center run game that makes people respect it because you can't chase downfield explosive plays that mirror run and pass unless you're able to run the football somewhat. Like, I think there's really good data out there that says you don't have to run it efficiently to have effective play action, but it definitely helps. And like, you're watching Hard Knocks and you could see Mike Tomlin talk about when the Browns got under center, there's like no fear of it. They're like, we're going to eat them up when they get under center. The Browns lost the physicality. And a little bit of it is like when you become an RPO heavy team, you get a little passive in your run blocking. You don't really displace or move people because you're really worried about the 1 yard halo rule. So you don't drive downfield. You're more body position. Think of it as playing like playing pick and roll kind of basketball where you're kind of just shielding a guy from going one direction. The Browns got good at it, but the problem is that you can't really develop downfield passing off of an RPO based offense because there's just only so far guys can get downfield and making those reads without your offensive line meandering into illegal man downfield territory. So I just think they lost some of the backbone of who they are from a physical standpoint. So I think getting back to being a wide zone based team with a lot of wrinkles off of it, and then obviously they still have two pretty talented guards. They can get into more back into their counter power stuff, which they did. They did do some gap scheme stuff this year still, but I think they need to be able to do it better and more cohesively from under center because it's just such a great under center play action variation. And again, when Kevin was hired, his whole thing was like, we lean into heavier personnel, which is another thing. I think the second or third thing I talked about, they need to get back into having meaningful second and third tight ends on the roster that can do a little bit of both in terms of run and pass concepts, right? And then I think a fullback would be good if they can find it and fit it in, like a fullback again, who can be an interesting part of your run game diversity and then be able to sneak out and catch the football here and there is also a thing I would be leaning into if I were them teams. The good teams running the football this year were using fullbacks as inserts in run game quite often. I think the Browns could benefit getting back into that world. And um, like I said, with Kevin's, arriving philosophy of like, we're going to be a team that is diverse and heavier personnel packages, and we're going to marry our run looks with our pass looks. And I just think they've gotten away from that as they've gotten into more of a world with Deshaun Watson as the focal point of what they're trying to do to find success. So the third thing I talked about in that is like they need to be more diverse in their alignment, formation wise, bunch sets, close to the line of scrimmage, putting themselves in those formations that give them the ability to get across the field quicker, that give them the ability to switch and change releases from the snap, that give defenses confusion on who to cover, and then they really need to have purposeful motion. If they don't have motion in this world, they're last in motion usage again this year. If you don't have motion and creating ways to get guys out on routes quicker, to change who the number one, two, or three is on any given side, that changes the defense's rules and coverage. If you're not doing these things to create easy button opportunities for your offense to find yards and players schemed open, I know we were talking before the show about a guy who I think is doing really well with this right now at the college level is Chip Kelly. Like the Ohio State is really good at using effective motion to create wrinkles to their concepts that create a burden, a mental burden on defenses to perform their run fit or their pass drop, and like that's something the Browns have just not been good enough at. And maybe Tommy Rees is able to help with that, or whoever they hired OC is able to help with that. But they need to really work on how they put motion into being an effective part of what they do. Because again, so many teams are using it for an advantage in the league. And the best offenses are doing that. The Rams, the 49ers, the Dolphins, the Vikings, they're all using the Packers. They're so good with motion, making defenses think all the time. You have to make defenses think all the time. And if you're not making them think, you're making their life easier. So they've got to get better at that.
Yeah, and again, I'm with you. Tommy Rees might be the answer to that. He's a guy that's a little bit more aligned with that based on what he did in college, both at Alabama and at Notre Dame.